is about Google placing its commercial products.
Gegen Google, sie prüft, ob ein Verstoß gegen
Wer im Internet etwas sucht, nutzt häufig Google.
Part of this bad week for Google.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories we've been following this week. There's a showdown looming in Brussels over Google, and the question, how big is too big? Stop the presses. It's time to rewrite Japan's World War II history. Is the government in Budapest taxing and regulating the freedom right out of the Hungarian media? Plus, mischief makers in Thailand, doing what the Thai media cannot get away with, and the general is not amused. On November 27th, the European Union voted in favor of a resolution that, if eventually passed into law, could unbundle search engines from other commercial services. In other words, it could prevent a company like Google, because that's who this resolution was written for, from optimizing its own products in a Google search. It's the latest salvo in an ongoing tussle between the EU and Google over how the company operates in Europe. And if the forces behind this initiative win the day, it could change the way that many Europeans get their news, much of which they currently access by using Google as a gateway. The tech giant has around a 90% share of online search traffic in Europe. That's an even larger share than Google gets in its home territory, the US. Those in Google's corner say that that's just a reflection of customer satisfaction. Many news organizations say that they like what Google does for them, directing traffic their way. But their fear is that if your story does not show up on the first page of a Google search, then you don't exist. Then there's the revenue issue. Google getting paid by its advertisers for simply channeling web traffic to content providers who say that more of those ad revenues should go to them. What this story boils down to is, should governments have the power to break up a digital behemoth like Google? And do those legislators really have our best interests at heart when they attempt to regulate the internet in this kind of way? Google's home base is in California's Silicon Valley. Our starting point this week is Brussels.
Europe has long had an unease with American tech giants, and now it's Google which is in the crosshairs.
But it's actually a war of many small battles.
When you've got 92% of the search market, you are in a so-called monopoly, and that needs to be regulated.
It's not just Google, it's Facebook, it's the whole internet, which has changed the nature of news distribution and media distribution.
This is a story that goes back 4 years to when the European Parliament first started making noises about Google. And it's not about any one issue. In fact, the EU has a bundle of concerns about Google and the other tech giants it is talking about unbundling.
Google and the EU have been at odds for a long time, and you can go back to the Street View incident where Google was gathering data back in 2006 without really telling anyone. And it stems from very different conceptions of privacy in the EU and in the United States. The United States generally try and underregulate, whereas the EU tends to be a little bit more focused on very specific regulations.
The second subject is about tax avoidance. It's not only Google, but many American companies, and especially in the digital environment, are aggressively using tax avoidance systems. And finally, and perhaps one of the major subjects, is the antitrust. There is a big antitrust inquiry made by Brussels now for the past 4 years, and this is a major subject where Google is considered to abuse of its dominant position.
In Europe, they tend to regulate ex ante, which is to say, before the case. And in America, they tend to regulate ex post facto, after a violation has taken place. But the vote is simply sending the message that we, as European regulators, are suspicious of Google, we don't like you, and we're going to do everything in our power to control you.
As the online gateway of choice for 9 out of 10 Europeans, Google has a monopoly that affects commerce in countless ways. Search for an address and you're on Google Maps with the ads that come with it. Look for a music video and you're on YouTube, part of Google's digital empire. And it's not just the platforms the company owns or the quirks of its secret search algorithms. Look for a restaurant, a new car, or a news story, and Google results can favor websites that pay the search engine for visibility.
Organizations of all kinds find that when Google tweaks its algorithms, and of course it never shows people how it's tweaked its algorithms, this is all very much behind the curtain stuff, then they find that traffic to their websites can suddenly fall off a cliff. This happens to news organizations, it happens to all sorts of web services.
So a large search engine wields two powers. The first one is relevancy, where it ranks you on a search request. And secondly, it sucks out all the advertising that used to get in classified ads by making advertising even more effective online, and they get the ad revenue and you don't. Those two things are very toxic to you as a media company. So what's the solution?
According to many Europeans, the solution is to break up or unbundle companies like Google, and there are US tech companies lining up behind the EU on this case. Microsoft is one of them, having been forced by the EU in 2009 to unbundle its Explorer browser and offer competing browsers on its operating systems, only to then see Google's Chrome overtake Explorer and grow into the market leader. Microsoft now wants the EU to turn its anti-monopolistic approach onto Google. A leading German voice in the debate is Matthias Döpfner, CEO of publishing giant Axel Springer, which owns Bild, Europe's biggest selling tabloid. In an open letter to Google's executive chairman Eric Schmidt, Döpfner wrote,
"We are afraid of Google. I must state this very clearly and frankly, because few of my colleagues dare do so publicly. The statement, 'If you don't like Google, you can remove yourself from their listings and go elsewhere,' is about as realistic as recommending to an opponent of nuclear power that he just stop using electricity. Historically, monopolies have never survived in the long term. Is it really smart to wait until the first serious politician demands the breakup of Google?"
Döpfner wrote that letter 6 months ago. The EU Parliament passed its resolution last week.
I would say that this open letter was a key trigger for Europe. Following this letter, it enables a lot of people who were thinking like Matthias Döpfner, but who were not brave enough to express it because they were fearing some retaliation from Google.
However, one must remember that Axel Springer is in a position where it's come from being a very powerful media giant. It is the publisher of Bild, it is the publisher of Die Welt, and it's upset that Google has the power and Axel Springer has less of it. And I think the solutions that Axel Springer are calling for are not necessarily the solutions that will benefit everyone, but are solutions that would benefit Axel Springer.
Google's monopoly on the search engine market in Europe has real implications for commerce, but news consumers are already unbundling, turning to social media, Facebook and Twitter, among others.
Google is powerful because it directs the flow of traffic and attention, and now we see that happening with Facebook too. It's becoming much more important in terms of the distribution of news stories, and so organizations that produce news, I think, are very right to be concerned about how they're going to make money off of their reporting as a business, because the traditional models don't work anymore.
When you look closely at what this means, though, most media companies find that about 20% of their traffic comes via search engine. Another 20%, almost exactly the same amount, comes via social media. So we can already see that the importance of the search as a way for people to find content is diminishing.
News junkies tend to be impatient. They don't wait for regulators, legislators, or lawyers. Whether searching, surfing, or scrolling for news, they want results. And they want them now. On the download this week, our viewers weigh in on Google and the EU.
The competition authorities here have been on Google's case for 4 years now, and the European Parliament's vote doesn't really change much about that. Now, the vote was very much a German-led initiative, and this debate in Germany has been very much led by the media industry there and the big publishing houses, which are purely engaged in this debate out of self-interest. I mean, they see Google eating away at their advertising revenue and threatening their business models.
It's without a doubt valuable to challenge the domination of Google. I think the best thing the EU can do and the EU institutions is to present legislation that creates a true single digital market, a marketplace where successful challengers to Google can thrive and grow.
We're always open to viewer feedback and ideas. If you've got an opinion on the news media, just go to our Facebook or Twitter page. Our Twitter handle is @AJListeningPost. Then fire up your camera, make a worthwhile point, hit send, and we'll see you on the download. Other media stories on our radar this week. Japan's best-selling newspaper has waded into the row between the Japanese government and the South Korean government over a dark, disputed chapter in the history of the two countries. The paper is Yomiuri Shimbun, and it has apologized for using the term sex slaves to describe Korean women who in World War II were forced to work in Japanese military brothels. From now on, the paper says it will use the term so-called comfort women instead. The conservative broadsheet is the latest to succumb to a government-led attempt to rewrite Japan's military history. 4 months ago, the left-leaning Asahi Shimbun newspaper retracted stories it had published more than 20 years ago on the abduction of South Korean women for the brothels. Officials from the two countries have now held 5 rounds of meetings on this issue, but their respective leaders have yet to meet since both took office 2 years ago. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has gone on the record saying that Japan needs to restore its honor and trust. This is a story that's being closely monitored in China, the Philippines, and numerous other Southeast Asian countries that maintain their women were also enslaved by the Japanese for sexual purposes. Journalism has long been a dangerous game in Colombia, and now the threats against news organizations there are growing specific. A militant group called Las Aguilas Negras, the Black Eagles, has issued death threats against 2 news outlets, Colombia's Canal Capital and Venezuela's Telesur, plus a media watch group, Reporters Without Borders. Canal Capital confirmed the threat on its Twitter feed, linking to the Black Eagles press release, which said, "Don't think you can continue smearing national heroes with your trashy investigations." The group then gave journalists 30 days to disappear. The Black Eagles are out to halt a peace process between the Colombian government and the guerrilla group known as FARC, who have been in a state of war for more than 50 years now. With 56 journalists killed since the turn of the century, Colombia is the second most dangerous country for reporters in Latin America, behind only Mexico. Some free media coaching now for the leader of Thailand's military junta. When you've got the mainstream news media under your control, whatever you do, don't give your political opponents an opening to poke fun at you online, because they will humiliate you. General Prayut Chan-o-cha's weekly televised address already had problems with the title. It's called Returning Happiness to the People. But the general was unhappy with the background for his speeches, Thailand's government house and its flag, and he made that known. That gave his critics a chance to get creative, and presto, a Facebook page with many helpful suggestions. When General Prayut was asked what he thought of the page and some of the ideas on it, he said, "I've seen it, they're all disgusting." One image had him in front of a poster for the Hunger Games. That's a reference to anti-government protesters in Thailand who have adopted the defiant 3-finger salutes from the film, which has since been pulled from some cinemas there. Of all the new democracies to join the European Union in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's collapse, the one with the most compelling media story may well be Hungary. Since his return to power in 2010, Prime Minister Viktor Orban and his Fidesz party have been making systemic changes to the way the media are regulated and the way they're taxed. The government even tried to put a tax on the internet per gigabyte, but that idea just didn't fly. Orban's got a 2/3 majority in parliament, and his critics in the media accuse him of using his powers to bring them to heel. Critical voices have tried to flee the mainstream media for the relative safety of practicing their journalism online. But even on the web, the situation can be problematic, as reporters learned in the case of Origo, one of Hungary's most popular digital news platforms. The Orban government says that freedom of the press is not under threat, that it's the poor quality of Hungarian journalism that's causing social harm. The Listening Post's Will Young now on the battle over the media space in Hungary.
When Hungary joined the European Union in 2004, it was considered a poster child for media freedom among Europe's new democracies. 10 years on, the picture is very different, and many in the media blame the second coming of Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Well, Viktor Orban lost an election in 2002, and I think the lesson he learned from that lost election was that his biggest enemy is, besides the opposition, is the independent media.
You don't have to be critical, you don't have to be an opposition. Even if you try to be middle of the road, you try to be independent, that can cause you problems.
Hungary witnessed 2 major media protests this year. The largest was in October, when the government tried to pass the world's first internet tax, a tax on data. What it proposed would have made watching videos on YouTube a money spinner for the government, up to $1 in taxes per hour. The protest was so big that the law was shelved. But 6 months ago, another media tax was passed, one on advertising, requiring all media outlets to pay up to half of their advertising revenues to the government. Newspapers ran blank pages in protest. TV screens faded to black, and radio stations broadcast the sound of static. Hungary's largest private broadcaster, RTL Klub, said the law would hit them harder than any other media outlet. They said the Orban government was targeting them deliberately.
This advertising tax is absolutely against RTL. We have the 15% of the Hungarian advertising market, and we pay 80% of the tax. Their premium goal in this whole thing is that they want RTL out of Hungary because they know that it's independent.
This new advertising tax is sometimes called an RTL tax. However, what happens is that it indirectly hurts the entire market. The largest players will pay the most tax, but the smallest players might end up paying the actual price.
Put that to the government, and the response seems to depend on who is answering the question. We asked the government spokesman, and he said RTL has it wrong.
Like any other tax, there is no target. In this respect, we haven't singled out or pointed out any single broadcasting agency or television. So it was high time to have a new and fair approach to distributing and sharing the burdens that come with the running of a country.
Ask the Prime Minister's office and you get a different view.
Úgy, mert hogy a Simicska média...
Szerintem azzal függ össze, hogy az RTL Klub évek óta nem fizet tisztességesen adót Magyarországon. Ezzel az egy dologgal függ össze.
Even those not affected by the advertising tax have reason to be nervous. 6 months ago, on the same day the tax was unveiled, Gergo Sarling, the editor of Origo, a leading online news outlet, was fired after running a piece that exposed a government expense scandal. Origo's parent company is the German telecommunications giant Deutsche Telekom, which has extensive business interests in Hungary. Dozens of journalists at the newspaper resigned in protest, including András Peto, who wrote the piece that got his editor fired.
Origo's official statements that deny that Gergő's dismissal had anything to do with politics, although at the same time we had come under pretty intensive pressure of political nature. Political pressure is not working through former letters or requests on a letterhead. It goes in a very informal way. If you're not vigilant enough, you won't even notice that your freedom was taken away.
And their news coverage changed, so it's less edgy, less pointed, friendlier to the government, less controversial topics, more tabloid-focused coverage.
RTL, the company that was or was not targeted by the advertising tax, has gone in another direction. It was known for its tabloid style, heavy on gossip, light on politics. That has now changed. After the government announced the advertising tax, the channel began to fight back. Not with tax lawyers, but through its journalism.
Actually, one thing is true that we have more politics in our main news today, but the reason is also or mainly because our main news is much longer than it used to be. And once we have extended the length of the news to 1 hour, then we could also introduce more political coverage in that 1 hour.
The evening news bulletin on RTL Klub has always been critical of the Orban government, and since the spring of this year it has turned overtly, well, I would say even hostile to the government, which basically means that it's doing its job.
In 2005, 1 year after joining the EU, Hungary ranked 12th in the World Press Freedom Index published by Paris-based Reporters Without Borders. Today, it ranks 64th. According to the EU's Charter of Fundamental Rights, freedom and pluralism of the media and the right to information are essential foundations of the Union. The Orban government is pushing the limits, but Hungary still receives billions of euros from Brussels.
I think we had a very clear vision about the regulation of public opinion and the media. It's been scrutinized in detail back in 2010 and 11. It has passed all the European institutions and bodies that have been scrutinizing it.
Countries wanting to join the European Union have to fulfill a lot of requirements, but once you are in, these core values are simply forgotten. The European Union is basically an economic integration. So whatever is related to human rights, media freedom, press freedom issues are treated in a different manner once you are in.
Once these countries have joined the organization, the European Union, the EU has no longer any leverage over them. The EU just doesn't have the means or perhaps the will.
The EU actually does have the means. What it lacks is the political will. The Orban government knows that, and until that changes, the Hungarian media will pay the price, as will the people. They are only getting part of their own story.
More voices on the download now on the media story in Hungary.
In recent years, we've seen that there's a consolidation taking place within the media sector. Pro-government interest groups and oligarchs have taken over many aspects of the Hungarian media sector. There are investigative journalism, NGOs, and websites publishing great news via the internet. However, it's clear that the reach of these portals pales in comparison to the reach of this very heavily biased pro-government public media.
Outside Budapest, it's especially hard to find independent news. The oppositional radio station Club Radio has lost all of its broadcast licenses outside Budapest, and independent regional community media have seen their frequencies given instead to religious and government-friendly broadcasters.
On the rule of the EU, the so-called Copenhagen criteria are enforced in countries that wish to be a member of the European Union. These criteria focus on, for example, human rights and freedom of expression. But after a country became a member of the EU, the Union basically has no means to enforce these criteria, and this is a big problem in Hungary right now.
Finally, there's an old adage, ask a stupid question, get a stupid answer. And when you get more than 3.5 billion search queries every day, as Google does, you've got to figure that maybe 500 million of the questions asked might not be that smart, which is something that the YouTube fundsters at collegehumor.com wanted to get at when they came up with their "If Google Was a Guy" idea. It's since grown into a 3-part series and provides us with a glimpse of just how much stupidity those servers must put up with on a daily basis. We'll see you next time here at the Listening Post.
Next! I said next! Why mile length?
Okay.
Cream cheese is cheese?
Wait, do you still want to know about
Avocado pit huge, why?
Okay, don't speak in these weird haikus.
Local mosque, Seattle.
NSA, don't mind me.
How to pronounce Dogecoin?
According to Google Maps, there's a
Security.
number. Can you please?
Not blackmail.
Just.
Siri, how big is the Serengeti?
Yeah,
No problem. Show me pictures of spaghetti.
No, that's not what she asked for.
Your search for
return no results.
Vaccines cause autism?
Well, I have 1 million results that say they don't, and 1 result that says they do.
I knew it.
Just because I have it doesn't mean it's true!
Oh, excuse me.
Oh, no, come on in. Today is Jackson Pollock's birthday, so we're celebrating his particular style of painting.
Why farts smell?
One of the most important painters of all time, and you want to know why farts smell, so there you go.
Bank transfer all money to Dogecoin how?
Okay, Glass. Search avoid being bullied for wearing Google Glass.
I think your F key is stuck. Why longitude shaped like an orange slice?
You are so wrong.
We'll see. Groundhog's Day or Groundhog Day?
Groundhog Day.
Oh!
Haircut place, bowl cut.
Terror pictures?
Oh.
Oh, sorry. Terrier pictures.
Okay.